Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It is a Reaction Tuesday, reaction to what we kind of thought would be inevitable, because it was really the momentum it was like a train coming right at you. You couldn't look away and you couldn't deny it, and you knew it was going to happen. But Boogie Fland on Tuesday, he began his official visit to Florida on Monday, so yesterday and today. After a really impressive season at Arkansas, riddled by injuries, missed, a chunk of games, 15 games. But he is no longer an Arkansas Razorback, and he's no longer an NBA potential draft pick. Boogie Fland is a Florida Gator. That news just dropped within the hour. And it really is probably, I don't want to over dramatize this. By the way, my name's Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If I didn't already introduce myself, I don't want to over dramatize this, but this is probably, when you look at the transfer portal era, and we know that transfer portal era is not exactly a fixed notion, because every year it's a little bit different because the rules have changed and because of how NILs really become a bigger and bigger thing. But when you look at the mass transfers and all the opportunities to lose guys, you really started to see a shift in how players transferred, how the portal became probably the biggest recruiting tool for college coaches at the Division I level, beyond the high school. We know that. We talk about it a lot. Retention's important, but when you're looking at making it new additions, the portal's kind of the thing. And in that era, Eric Patrick Mulsman coming to Arkansas, what was it, 6 years ago, was really kind of a master of how to work the portal to get players that he brought to Nevada, and other schools were just starting to kind of figure it out. That's how much of a mushroom cloud, intercontinental ballistic missile, impact the portal has become in such, it's just has blown up to a whole different thing, and it continues to kind of evolve. But having described the setup like that, in that era, everybody that went into the portal from Arkansas was kind of pushed there. Arkansas didn't lose anybody under EPM that he didn't want to leave. Didn't lose anybody that he didn't want to leave. Caliperry, came in and assembled a roster as a new coach and a new staff. And, he really wasn't trying to retain anybody off that previous team. There weren't many left. But the one guy that was left, he did retain, Trevor Brazil. He retained the players that he wanted to retain off of this first Arkansas roster, with being just fine with Big Z moving on, given what the expectations for Big Z were to come back, not only in the raise he was going to get, but the playing time he wanted in the role he wanted promised. And Arkansas was fine with him moving on. Arkansas knew Adu Thero was going to go into the NBA draft process. That was always the plan, assuming he had the kind of season that would allow himself to do it. That's why he came and played for Caliperry for a third college season for him this past season in Arkansas. You knew Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu were out of eligibility. You knew that the moves that were being made when you talk about Adu Thero, were going to be the same for Boogie Fland. So in a sense, this is a loss, because you've got an all SEC, all league caliber player leaving your squad to go help another SEC team that, oh, by the way, just won a national championship and is trying to establish itself, kind of like a UConn lately, back-to-back natties. This is kind of how you do that. Bring back some of the core guys, and most of that'll be, some of that'll be frontline. Maybe a lot of it will be if Alex Condon ultimately withdraws from the NBA draft and comes back to school. But now you go from a team that was probably looking up at teams like Kentucky and Arkansas, projected as arguably the top two teams in the league, maybe others in that mix, I won't deny that, but two of them, and two at the top of the pecking order in some order, with Florida probably being second all-time, Arkansas third. But going into this season, maybe Florida's not at the very top, but something like today, combined with an Alex Condon decision to come back, and now all of a sudden Florida's going to look like a top 5 team in college basketball coming into next season. And arguably you're looking at them going, should they be the preseason favorite to win it? That is a stomach punch for Razorback fans, because it's how do you not call that a loss? But let's not forget, Caliperry's retention plan and the retention video and all of that was with the idea that Boogie Fland was not only in the draft, but going to stay in the draft and get drafted, probably a late first rounder, was the thought at the time. That was back in mid-April. 5 days later, Fland, on the last day when you can do it, entered his name into the college transfer portal, in addition to still being in the draft. So 5 days after all the retention stuff, that retention video we said at the time, you didn't do that in haste. That was done after weeks after the season ended, and probably discussions in, well in March, into mid-April to get everything in line, who's staying, who's going, how do you retain guys? And so a lot of work went into that plan. Darius Acuff Jr., a McDonald's All-American 5-star guard, was in your plans to be Boogie's replacement way before that. Way before that. He committed to Arkansas. Remember, he committed in July, almost a year ago. He couldn't sign until November. But if you're going to compare that position to who the plan was for the next roster, it was Darius Acuff Jr. DJ Wagner's part of that plan. Some kind of a combo role. There'll be times where he's on the court with Acuff, times where he's on the ball. So we always said this was going to be a crowded scenario to bring him back. But the gut punch doesn't change the fact that you're looking at it going, wait a minute. We just let this caliber of player go to Florida. That's how it's going to feel. It looks like, was this malpractice on Caliperry's part? I just don't think it was. I don't think it was. There was that price tag, that number out there. Once Fland got in the portal, there was, at some point there was momentum with Florida and $7 million, and we laughed at that. I said it wouldn't be 7, it wouldn't be 5. I said I doubt it even be half. On one of these pods, I said it'll be somewhere between $2, maybe $3 million. Boom. Matt Norlander with CBS Sports reporting. I'm assuming he sourced this, but said north of $2 million. All right, that's logistically, monetarily about where I thought things would be. Florida and that amount. Okay, that sounds about right. And so then your thoughts race to, well, Arkansas can spend NIL. Why didn't they do that? Again, the amount you pay is also corresponding to how are you going to use that guy? You're not spending $2 or $3 million for, potentially upsetting the apple cart, not necessarily how other players take it, but just really having a definitive role to make it all work. And I just don't think when you're looking at a guy like a Darius Acuff, Caliperry does it differently than other places are doing. He's going out and getting the top-rated players at each position, even in his depth. You've got high-level guys that would be coveted by anybody. Florida, the model Todd Golden has, is different. I mean, look at guys like Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, the other guard, Will Richard, who was a carryover. He'd been at Florida a few years. Even some of the frontline guys, as good as they are, they're not, these packaged up 5-star level guys. You could say, well, they're 5-star quality, if they were portal guys based on what they did. Aberdeen jumped in the portal, their 6th man or their first guard off the bench and end up at Kentucky. So they lost one of their key guys. It happened to them even. But getting a Boogie Fland will be a little bit different for Florida than how the model has been so far for Todd Golden. He's getting a McDonald's All-American 5-star guy. Some of those other guys really weren't that. It doesn't mean that he can't make this work. He's a great coach. The point is, it's how these dynamics fell into the play and the chronology of how things shook out. No one could have foreseen this a few weeks ago. Again, 5 days after the retention video is when Boogie Fland announced he was also getting in the portal. And still we thought that was just precautionary. That was an off-ramp. Didn't seem like, something that was going to be necessary for him. As it turns out, it absolutely was. Could he have stayed in the draft, gone through the combine, completed all that, wrote it out a little bit longer? Sure. But I think he'd probably gotten enough feedback where he felt like the combination of things. How high can I really go where I can make really good money that'll be better even than in 1 year than some of that back end first round money? I can bet on myself to get maybe a lottery slot. I'm playing with a winner, a team that just won a national championship and we know is going to be good with the other guys they're bringing back, and Fland gets another shot at it. It makes a lot of sense. Coming back to Arkansas, there's going to be a lot of competition. I just mentioned it, and I just don't think it was a viable path for what Caliperry has sold to his top guys to try to rewrite all of that here at the last minute and make them believe in it. That could have been a problem. As good as a talent as Fland is and Acuff, you're going, how do you not make that work? Look what he did at Kentucky. I've talked about all that. I think Kentucky, they didn't go into it thinking Reed Sheppard would be anywhere near as good as he was to begin with. And as it turned out, he had multiple elite shooters with one guy who couldn't. So they could mix and match who played on the ball and guys playing off the ball, and make that work and stagger it and make it work. And it was also a different offensive system they were running at the time than what he's back to doing now. That guy they brought in moved on, and they had one of the top offenses in the country. Weren't as good defensively, by the way. So we say they made it work. They made it work on one end. They didn't necessarily make it work on both ends. So I haven't even talked about the defensive part of it until now. So I'm not trying to justify everything and say, oh, Calipari made the best move. I mean, there were qualities about Boogie. You say, well, that Arkansas might be lacking that going into this ready-made roster with all this retention, and you get Carter Knox back, which we still expect. Why wouldn't you try to keep him? I never felt like that was something Arkansas was going to effort. I never did. I left open the possibility of Calipari. I said, if he flips a switch, that's how I defined it. If he flips a switch and says, you know what, all of a sudden I think I need this, and I'm going to have to figure out a way to get these other players on board, guys like Acuff, DJ, we'll play more small ball. I'll figure out a way not to let up defensively and still have, because you are going to compromise your backcourt size, just like they did at Kentucky 2 years ago. It wasn't just about guys' ability to play defense. It was just weren't very big in the lineup with that many guards on the court all the time. So this is where we are. How should Calipari and Arkansas respond? The other thing is, well, we just made another SEC team better. I mean, I go back to it again. I just walk through it. Arkansas's never lost a player to the portal to a league foe with such promise and such ability. Normally, that's part of your retention plan, but because everything we know and just described in the chronology and what thought was going to be the plan, Arkansas really didn't lose anything. They weren't counting on this. They weren't hoping for this. And when it became clear he was getting out of the NBA draft, they weren't. I mean, I could read the room, man. When we interviewed Calipari, he didn't lock in on, we're going to examine this and really see how. I asked him. I'm the one that asked. What about Boogie? Is there a pathway back? Well, we always support Boogie, me, the program, myself, whatever he needs, that kind of thing. And, it almost sounds like you're, if you're ever in Fayetteville and need a place to crash, we're here. Kind of sounded like that thing, right? If we ever see you again. And so I know we always leave out because we're not absolutes. We circle back to here's what this could, but maybe, if he flipped a switch and decided not to be okay with this and we need to keep Boogie. But I don't think you keep a player and try to do all that and upset all of your plans and how you envision it to keep another team from getting them. And just to say, well, I have a track record of not losing my top level guys. Again, the word lose. What did you lose? We can argue this back and forth. They never planned to have him. They back. That was never part of the plan. It was not part of the plan going back to Acuff, let alone how the dust started settling recently. The plan was Acuff's that next guy we're handing the ball to. We did that with Boogie. The next guy is in waiting. It was always where this was going. And you say, well, why can't you make adjustments based on the reality of circumstances as they change that you did not foresee? That's a fair point to bring up. But at the same time, it's also fair to bring up, so functionally, how are you going to make it work? I can give you examples again, if you want to point to the Kentucky thing I just did, how some of that, they got lucky with some of that, and the other part was they weren't so good in parts of the game that kept them from maybe being as good as they could be. And maybe that played a little bit into their postseason problem that year. So I'm 15 minutes in now. This is what it is. Now, at the end of the day, the optics, that's the other thing. The folks are going to jump on this. Who cares? The thing that Caliperry shouldn't do, how should Arkansas respond? I think if they have a plan and they believe in it, they should stick to it. There should be no knee jerk response. Okay, this changes our calculations now. Now we got to go get a PJ Haggerty or somebody else. No, if that's not what you have lined up, if you have roles that you see and all that, the only way that you probably, in my opinion, wisely navigate that is get it. Wait, everybody's moving on campus at the end of the week. Summer session's about to start early next week. Summer session 1. You'll go through the physicals. You'll start your limited practices that basically run June through July. And so that may be a week staggered out based on the timing of when summer session 1 begins, I believe on May 27th. That's a Tuesday. May 28th is the deadline to withdraw from the draft. So we'll hear something from Carter Knox either way. If Knox stays in the draft, which I don't think will happen, then you got to go get a banger. You got to go get a big name splash guy that helps solve some things. And that's, a guy like Jameer Watkins. We started talking a little bit more about him yesterday, would make sense. You can argue, well, he makes sense if you get Carter Knox back too. That's a fair debate. I see where the staff lines up on this stuff, and it's not that I'm just going to jump on board with them. I've said it both ways. I see both sides of it. I think what Arkansas should do, regardless of Boogie Fland staying in the draft or doing what he did, was the same talking point. We weren't saying anything different before he got out of the draft and you knew he was going to be a college player again. We're saying the same talking points then as we're having now, so that shouldn't change. At minimum, why not add one more player that can really help you? Doesn't have to be a splash, big minutes guy. Can you get some depth on the wing at a guard spot, a shooter, someone that brings a little different element than some of the things that you have now and that might be an issue, where you can figure that out. Even if it's a versatile guy, versatile enough to be help you at the 4, can shoot some and help stretch the floor, help make defenses game plan a little differently and consider that gravity that's going to be that's going to shift how they can defend a team and not load up on sitting down on everything, loading up on gap help schemes because they want you to shoot threes. We'll see. Arkansas, we've talked about it, based on the roster as is, getting Carter Knox back. There's a pathway for Arkansas to be similar to the 3-point shooting last year, and maybe even a little bit better. Do I see enough to say they move the needle to consistently be at that 35% watermark, between 34 and 35%, like we saw most of the Elite 8 and Final Four teams? I don't think I see that quite. Not saying they can't do it, but that's why, to me, you maybe should try to add one more playable type of guy. Not necessarily a far back end emergency only, more developmental, maybe a candidate to redshirt, like a couple of the guys in this 10. Again, when I say 10, I'm thinking Carter Knox is coming back. Always qualify that so you don't get confused on the numbers, knowing technically he's still in. I do. I think Arkansas needs at least one more depth piece. Does Caliperry think that? He says they might be done. He said less is more. And I went through all that. Before he said it on a couple of my segments, I went back. Arkansas won exactly one game last year against a team with a pulse with 9 guys available, all 9. We knew they had a top 9 rotation, and we always said that could be problematic with injuries, all that. Well, they went through all the injuries and stuff, a lot of it non-conference. And then some later when they got in the conference with their 2 leading scorers and leading stat guys across the board, and they started winning games. It's crazy. You're like, well, that's not ideal. No, we say it's not ideal, but it worked out. The more that guys were put front and center with expectations of, okay, you don't have a guy you're looking over your shoulder at. You're not splitting as much time here, and we need this from you. It helps shape and define guys. The talking points are, there are going to be people that say, it's no big deal. Arkansas was better without Boogie. I think they would have been potentially do some of the same things they did if it had been Boogie that remained healthy and it was DJ that went out. Because it wasn't just about that position and who played better at that position. It was that it forced guys to slide into more natural, comfortable positions. I don't think DJ is the most desirable lead guard quality product out there. But he's a good one. He's just not. I don't think that. I think he's a tweener. I don't think he's a good enough shooter to be a two. And I think some of his instincts and how he reads situations as a one is problematic. It's probably part of why he suffers a lot of turnovers and has those weird stretches where you're not really sure what the hell is he doing. I'm not trying to bag on DJ. I think he's a hell of a player and a big reason. I mean, he's one of those guys that as the attrition kicked in and Arkansas's numbers went down from a 9 rotation to 8 to 7, and then when you couldn't really play Big Z very much, sometimes you were kind of really at 6, getting the minutes and making these wins happen. He was a big part of that. But him sliding down and being and you're not as much counting on him as a 2, and Nelly at the 3, and Carter trying to play the 3 in tandem with the minutes that Nelly's getting there and all that. The natural order of their players' strengths came into play. And Arkansas got bigger too. They got bigger 1 through 3 by Boogie being out, which made them a little more, of a presence defensively, more physical and sized presence physically on the perimeter. So there were multiple things. It wasn't just about Boogie. All right, 21 minutes in. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. So how do you respond? I mean, if it's my team, I'm adding another player that can play and help me shoot the ball. And again, if that's another guard and you can make it work minutes wise and figure that out, so be it. If that means you play more smaller lineups or more minutes with Carter at the small ball 4 because you didn't get a backup for Trevin when he's out or in foul trouble or helping at the 5, then so be it. You build your game plan around how you've got a lot of talent. Here's things we compromise a little bit. And here are things that we added, but you do that. If it's more of a bigger player, again, a versatile kind of 4 guy that can shoot and space the floor a little bit. I mean, I throw in a Mika Mirian if he's reclassing, you can get him. He'd be year 1 as a reclass at 18 years old now, so he's not a baby. I mean, for the reclass, he wouldn't be where it's completely out of context age-wise, but can stretch the floor, can protect the rim. He's got length, height, athleticism, 6'10". I'm just throwing that in there. Go do that, man. If that's something you can make happen. However you do it. He's an international guy, but played high school ball here this year on the for Arizona Compass Prep. But if you could go get an international player that can plug in, or if it's, I don't know. I mean, to me, they've just been so quiet, and really, it seems to me that your big board right now, it's just Carter Knox coming back or not. And then you've got a board for if he doesn't, but the big board's really him for now. And Kev, we trust. Oh boy. All right, Big A. So it's weird. It's just kind of like, just the optics of it and the feeling of a level of that player leaving Arkansas to another SEC team. It's just undeniably depressing or, shocking. Not because we weren't getting ready for this over the last few days, but it's still, I don't know what movie it was. It was a comedy, and I can't remember it. But someone said, yeah, it was very shocking to learn of their death. He said, oh, he's been sick for years. Was that Fletch? It was Fletch. And he goes, right, but the actual death itself is still a shock. When it actually happens, you're still in shock. That was Fletch. I went blank there for a second. Sorry about that. It's kind of like that. You knew this was coming, but it's still like, jolting, right? Because it's really real. It's real. I mean, it was, last week was the combine. It's been about a week since the dude dropped out. I mean, hell, he went to the combine. He accepted an invitation. He showed up. He was in Chicago. They measured him. We talked about the measurements. One of the few that his college listed height and weight were almost identical to what the dude showed at the combine in measurements. He was on a roster. He was named to the roster. One of the 40 on the roster, however many, 4 teams, 10 players, or whatever it was. He was one of those. We talked about all that, and then boom, the dude's withdrawn from the combine, withdrawn from the draft, and now he's a college player again. and things really escalated quickly, as Ron Burgundy likes to say. That's what happened. Um, so, how do you respond? Again, we're talking about that. I think you stick to your knitting, and my knitting would be add one more. Cal's may not be, other than getting Carter back. Either way, you don't overreact to this. Fans love stuff like that, though. Now all of a sudden we're back in the market for a big name guy. I mean, if you weren't doing that with Boogie staying in the draft, why would you do it now? Just because he came out and then went to a competitor. An argument could be made. Well, Caliperry's moves are based on what he needs to get, how he needs to navigate the SEC or some of the top teams in the country and position the team to be better than those teams. And now Florida just got better, but still, Calipari's not one of those that has to do that because he recruits at such a high level that it's everybody else trying to figure out what they need to overcome the personnel quality that a Calipari is going to assemble. And none of that's different than it was yesterday or the day before or the days before Boogie made I think the shocking thing was the fact that he was just not even going to go through the combine process and at least give himself a chance. He just got out. And it tells you everything. That deal with Mike Miller, his agent in Florida, where he played school, and that they had a good enough NIL offer for him, and packaging that with the kind of exposure and opportunity he's going to have playing with a national champ with a chance to maybe help that program run it back and have its second, two-peat or repeat in the school's history going back to the 2000s. And then that would also propel him in the next draft, and he can have it all. He can have the great money now, and in a year's time, put himself in a position where he's back to the guy they're talking back in lottery like they were before he got hurt and what he was doing in Arkansas. So, what's the real risk there? Because if he backslides, he's probably still going to command a lot of NIL money, gives himself more opportunities. Get healthier, add to the weaknesses, things that were exposed to his game, really work on those things. I mean, I hate to sit here and sing his praises and talk about what he might and can do at Florida, but that's a reality coming up because when we look at the SEC pecking order now, I think, this is, again, a Florida team. You're talking maybe if they get Alex Condon back, they're going to project top 5 in the country. We see Arkansas consistently kind of back in top 10, some top 20, closer to 20th, and some of the other way too early stuff. But John Rothstein updated his rankings yesterday, and he still has Arkansas 10th. Didn't move them anywhere. Still thinks Carter Knox is coming back. Again, all the math for Arkansas has really been what it was with or without Boogie. I mean, without Boogie. All of it was planned to be without Boogie. Just now it's not NBA, it's Florida. And I have to think that, look, Arkansas for sure will be playing at Florida next year because Arkansas hosted Florida this year in a one-off. There was no round robin. So we'll see when the league matchups come out. Do I rule out the chance that Arkansas and Florida will play a round robin this year and home and away? All these new way of saying it, home and home. I don't like that. We're talking from the perspective of one team, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas, in those situations, plays one at home and one away. It's a home and away. Could Arkansas and Florida be lining up for a home and away this year? I don't think something like that is made happen because of this. I'm saying we just don't know yet. Those things come out soon. Could Arkansas and Florida do a home and away? If not, if it's a one-off, it's in Gainesville, which brings up something else interesting, right? I mean, last year, you had Caliperry from Kentucky to Arkansas, moving the headquarters from Lexington to Fayetteville. And you had several players, Wildcats, follow him, 3. And then you had the return to Rupp, right? All the big hullabaloo. And Arkansas was really struggling at that point. I think they were 1-6 in conference play. That actually picked up a league win, had just lost to OU. I think they had a week off. Is that right? No midweek game, if I'm remembering correctly. I might be remembering incorrectly, but they played Kentucky in Rupp. And Arkansas shocked the world. Kentucky was one of the top teams in the league. Nope, not perfect, but had some really big wins on the season. In conference, out of conference, had already beaten Florida. All that stuff swirling and, storming for Arkansas on the other side. and snowballing good for one program than the other, and Arkansas goes in and slaps them around. This would be another road game with a one of those scenarios, not a coach but a player, and as good as Florida was and Arkansas the way it finished, and both teams could be two of your top 3 or 4 teams in the league by the time they play and meet up in conference play. There's going to be a lot of headlines and a lot of talking points, a lot of storylines, and a lot of, maybe it's revenge 2.0 for Calipari. Not that he looks at it like that. I don't think there's no ill will, bad blood. Again, this was just, this is not how. If he had a crystal ball and knew, before he finalized retention, that this would play out the way that it did with Boogie, again, 5 days after the retention announcement. Arkansas made that a retention announcement because they had all their ducks in a row. There weren't still things out there maybe that would or wouldn't work out with guys like DJ Weather. They knew what they were getting back. It was already the NIL, all of that. And then they put that out. So all the plans were in place. What happened 5 days later was not part of any plan that anybody thought of, knew of, or believed in, which was Boogie giving himself a portal off ramp. And then everything that played after that still was not expected. Unbiased Brim, you're right, Kevin. So, so revenge, that's probably not a good word for it, because revenge is kind of one of those things. So I think with Calipari leaving Kentucky, it was bittersweet. He's going to say all the right things. He has a lot of fond memories. He seems to me to be the kind of guy that is going to embrace the positives of that run he had there. But don't think there's not a competitive part of him. Don't think that there's not a part of him that not just because he wants to win games wherever he is, but that, it just means more. The old SEC motto, it just means more. Well, that's applicable for Cal when he plays Kentucky. Maybe there'll be an essence of that. This is the guy that's used to bringing in top level players, and they either go on to the NBA or play for him a little longer until they can get to the NBA or whatever happens to him. The track record is undeniable. It's the best ever in terms of high-level guys he gets, high-level guys he helps develop for that next level, and how they flourish after that. The numbers are astounding. Yeah, you can point to examples of things that kind of petered out or were dudded out or whatever. When you operate at such a high level with that volume of numbers, it's a numbers game. Yeah, you're going to have some misses. But this was not a miss. Boogie's not moving on because he was a miss. It was just everything we described. It was just a perfect storm of, you got to stomach and swallow the bitter pill of, God, really? We just sent an all-league caliber guy to Florida, and we're going to, the defending national champs. You're welcome. You're welcome. How can we help? Where's the, do we get, Arkansas is not going to get, monetary considerations in return, or a player to be named later. There are no draft picks coming out of this, right? This isn't the league where you get something back, or you figure out a way to make a trade before a player walks so you get something back. It's not the same. But at this level now, and guys getting paid like pros, and the SEC being the greatest conference ever last year, it's at the attention on this league's at a heightened frenzy. And so and this is probably the only kind of situation that can play out this, because you have a John Calipari as your head coach. He recruits 1 through 8, or last year 1 through 9 at such a high level. Your 9th man last year with Billy Richmond III, a 5-star. That was your 9th man, the way the roster was constructed. You could say it was Trevor Brazile. Oh, Trevor Brazile? Wasn't he a preseason All-SEC player a couple of years ago? And Eric Patrick Musselman said he was one of the 5 best players in the SEC. So if there's anything odd that happens when you recruit at that level, that means in a scenario like this, the team that's getting your guy, who was your guy, is not getting chopped liver and somebody that nobody's really paying attention to. It's going to be a high-level name guy. Everything fell in a certain way. Again, a perfect storm for us to both loathe and, commiserate over it and cry about it and dread it and all that. But there's also an opportunity to kind of refocus and say, what is Calipari's vision? What was it last year? We took shots at it at times. Not enough shooting on that team. Looking at it before. Not enough depth. What about injuries? And we weren't wrong. But what nobody saw was what when it whittled down to 6 or 7 or 8, whatever, and they got better. They were still winning games. I don't like that formula moving forward, going, oh, that'll just happen every time. If you have some injuries and you're only 8 deep, you'll be fine. We proved it last year. Each situation's different. But when you recruit at such a high level at every position, you got a good shot at that being actually, you survive it. So, you don't want to fully bank on it. Again, if it's me and mine, I'm adding an additional piece. Somebody that's got some, if I could get it, if it was up to me, it wouldn't just be someone that can space the floor, stretch the floor. It'd be a high level international guy that's, you can shoot, or a proven college player that can shoot. And whether that's, again, a guard or a 3-4 versatile guy or 4, that'd be me. If Caliperry doesn't add any more, it's obviously his plan. And they've put more attention on maybe less is more, maybe we don't do anything else and we're happy with what we have. They put enough attention on that for it. Really, I see it 2 ways. Either they're trying to prep us because that's really what they're going to do, and they don't fully close the door on it because maybe they could change their mind later based on some dynamic they can't see right now. So they leave the door cracked for, we could add one and we have the resources that, or they certainly know they're going to do something and they just want it under the cloak of night. They want it in darkness for now because they got to wait to see the draft process play out, see if they for sure are getting Carter back. Just make sure on that. See who else shakes out of that. The landscape changes a little bit. He's a guy that's added players late. Don't forget that after teams have already moved on to campus and started prep work and all that stuff. He's done it over the years at Kentucky. So he has a track record for that. He loves those reclass scenarios. There's players right now. We talked about Mika Mirren, and there's other ones. I just covered multiple of these high-level guys that can end up making decisions like that. And now you're back to, okay, we're going to get Nate Ament. Can we figure this? So let's not give up on the idea that there's not a pathway for it, because they've even acknowledged that. It's kind of the less light they've put on that, more light on maybe we're good. Maybe less is more. And I don't hate what they've done. I just think, again, addressing shooting and maybe front court depth, and if you could wrap both into one guy, if you're only going to do one more, if you get to a point where you convince yourself. It's a lot of what ifs and how do we do it? Florida going back to back. I think Florida needs to get Condon back. I think Alex Condon and getting him back that's, we're talking top 5 and all that's not solely based on getting Boogie. It's also an Alex Condon, circling back to college. But they got Brian Haupt on that front line, Micah Logden, who, when I was doing my preseason show, I had Florida higher for SEC. I did an SEC power rankings way before the season started. I think it was in September maybe. And I had Florida in my top 4. And a little higher than most did in preseason because I know the quality of Todd Golden as a coach and some of those pieces. But I also was operating under the idea that they might not get hand-locked him back. And I still thought they'd be that good. They did get him back. He helped them in their depth, but this was kind of their feature frontline guy, or one of them. And he became more of an important depth piece, but still more of a depth piece. So you'll have him back. You get Condon back, man, and the Haupt guy, he's back. He might be a future pro. They've got Xavier Lee out of the Ivy League that's going to be in that backcourt with Boogie. They got some other pieces. You get Condon back in concert with this addition of Boogie here, and all of a sudden Florida's talking national title again. And they may be really, they might have a pathway to make it work without Alex Condon. They got enough pieces on that front line to be really good, and we'll just see. But I would feel more comfortable throwing them in those conversations in a top 5-ish kind of thing with a Condon. But $2 to $3 million, somewhere north of $2 million, that was what I always thought would probably be what he got coming back. One of the top portal guys. What else is there to say here? We're almost 40 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't done that already. That helps us out. The big news today, Boogie Fland to Florida. It's the old Fletch thing where, you acknowledge that someone been sick for years and you knew it was coming. It was inevitable. But when it actually happens, it's still a jolt, right? It's still that thing. And Boogie to Florida. And we'll pretend like this happened all in a rush and happened really fast because, yeah, it was just last week. Draft combine, he backs out. But this time of year, I'll go to the Jerk and Steve Martin. The first day seemed like a week. Every day takes forever. The days are running together for me because there's been so much news all over the place, and we thought, well, it's been quiet for Arkansas outside the two big guys. Yeah, but around college basketball in general, just so much movement with players in the portal. Yeah, that part of it slowed down, but you've had the draft combine. You got the draft coming up. You've got the circuit now underway, and coaches in that first weekend. I mean, basketball is still busy. I always say 365 days a year is what basketball is. On a leap year, just at +1, right? It just is, man. No other sport is like this, in my opinion. When you're talking about sports that people really, really care about like this, we could say, well, the college landscape, yeah, but I mean, Arkansas's brand marketing, and especially Caliperry, is also tied to the NBA. That's the other thing this year. When you look at this, I mean, there are going to be people that recruit against Calipari and say, Adu Thero was the only guy. They had two guys go in. He brought a guy in like Nelly Davis. That didn't necessarily help him get in the NBA. Jonas Adu, Adu Thero, if he doesn't go in the first round, they're going to look, Calipari didn't even have a first round. I mean, all of it matters, especially for this program right now, all basketball. That's why we cover it and talk about all of it. We don't shortchange you and just do the fun stuff. Some of the stuff you got to get in the trenches, grind it out, and then talk about what we know, not what someone else knows and we're just borrowing from. I think it's all important. All these levels, the pro level, college level, the high school level, it's all important. And so these little dynamics going on right now are not just about Boogie to Florida and the stuff we talked about, but the idea was they're going to use it against Caliperry. He couldn't get this guy drafted. It was under his watch. Add that to the list of ones that didn't. When the real story is, and we'll remind you that it's the best success story ever for a college coach in developing guys and they flourish at the next level. Again, when you're operating in such large volume and numbers, there's going to be some shrinkage, some loss. You lost some. There's going to be some problems in there. Boogie can still be a success story, but it won't be that Calipari gets credit for that now, and that'll be used against him in recruiting. All right, we just kind of covered everything, I think. I think we can wrap it up now. Boogie Fland to Florida. I think I've hit all the talking points. I hope I have. If there's anything I didn't answer, send me a message via message in a bottle. Carrier pigeon will do another show. We can, whatever. We'll be back to talk more Razorbacks basketball. If anything else breaks, if Carter Knox announces he's coming back to school today, if we start learning of potential workouts with teams, I've noticed over the last few years, those are getting more and more quiet and less publicized. And a lot of teams are trying to get their stuff done and knocked out closer to the combine. You see the date even closer to withdraw if you're going to come back to college for some of these guys to do some of that stuff. And then if you line up enough of these and you're hearing enough from teams that at least one's going to guarantee you something, and other ones want to bring you in, then you're probably not going to withdraw and you're going to continue to work out all and do some of these individual team stuff and all that leading up to the draft. So next few days, it's nut cutting time for that decision. But roughly a week. Today's the 20th, the 28th. So 8 days from now is the deadline. But if Carter Knox makes if there's anything important, which to me is either an announcement later today that I'm staying in or I'm coming back, stay or pro from Carter, I'm coming right back on here. I will. If not, probably be sometime tomorrow. But until next time, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. Kevin McPherson, HogvilleNET YouTube Live signing off. Take care of yourself. See you soon.